The objectivist movement is probably ultimately much broader than I'd like it to be.
Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good, good. Well, that clip was of Ayn Rand Institute Chairman Yaron Brook apparently lamenting that the objectivist movement is larger than he'd like it to be.
Yeah, he seems to want it to be very narrow.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to play that with fuller context. This came up as a result of someone asking Yaron about the growth of the objectivist movement. And honestly, his focus was that it couldn't even really be defined, much less measured. And I just thought that that related to a show we did recently about what is a woman, where they were hesitant to define what is a woman. And that is, part of objectivism is, the definitions and defining our terms. That was a big part of it.
Right. Rand was very interested in conceptual clarity. She wrote a whole book on epistemology and how to come up with your concepts. And it's very important to have a clear concept so that you can distinguish it from everything else that exists in the world. So I think it's very strange that Yaron is hesitant to define the objectivist movement. I am certainly interested in defining it. I want to know what it is and what its goals are, what we should be doing, and exactly how to form a plan to spread Ayn Rand's ideas.
Good, good. And hopefully that'll come out as we're playing these clips of this question and answer and a follow-up a few days later. But again, in the first clip, they're being asked about measuring growth in the objectivist movement.
You objectively measure growth in the objectivist movement. Your show growth is flat. My show growth is flat right now. It's there are periods in which it grows a lot and there are periods in which it's flat. What is it? What is the objectivist movement? Are people part of the objectivist movement who disagree with me vehemently about a particular issue and have unsubscribed?
Yeah, in this hypothetical, I think Yaron accidentally gives away his dividing line for who belongs in the movement, whether they disagree with him vehemently or have unsubscribed. I don't know why that would be an impact on whether one was still part of the movement. I mean, he claims that the show isn't part of the Ayn Rand Institute anyway. He's also told us that he can't even get Leonard to listen to his shows either. I mean, is Leonard still part of the movement?
Yeah, I think Leonard actually dropped out of the movement. He's retired. But it is curious that he does say that about his show, like whether, people who have unsubscribed are part of the movement. That's a strange thing to ask. And it seems like he is using that as a measurement for who is in the movement. But then obviously he doesn't go by that because, later on we're going to learn that he includes other people. So it's not a good sign when the ARI chairman, doesn't know who's part of the objectivist movement or can't articulate it or define it. But if you just, he's fond of looking things up and then online and then repeating it on his show. So maybe he should just go to Wikipedia and look up objectivist movement. And on that site, it says it's basically just individuals who seek to study and advance objectivism. I mean, that's not a bad definition. I would include other things like people who not only study and seek to advance objectivism, but also people who seek to criticize it and look for flaws and ways to correct it. So that's also a part of it. But broadly speaking, a movement is just a bunch of people coming together or working individually to spread certain ideas that they agree upon. They have this shared system of ideas, this shared philosophy, and they want to spread it around the world. And this creates a movement of this new ideas entering the culture. And so you can do that in an organized fashion or disorganized or unorganized fashion.
Sure. And that Yaron does talk about the broader influence of objectivism, even though he still can't define the movement.
It depends how you define the objectivist movement, the influence objectivism has, the voice objectivism has. Then I think it's much larger than the people who subscribe or listen to this show. But it's hard to measure the growth of the objectivist movement, and it's hard to, again, define what objectivist movement is, what the definition of an objectivist movement is. What is the objectivist movement? Who counts? Who doesn't count? Who's a member? Who's not a member?
This actually seems like a petty question to me. Like, who counts? Who doesn't count? I mean,
Yeah.
he's just being asked to, define the movement and give some measurements of it. And he doesn't have to give every measurement. He could just focus on, what he knows. Like, he knows people who are objectivists, who are spreading the ideas. He could talk about them. People like Greg Salmieri or Onkar Gate or David Kelly, if he's willing to go over to the Atlas Society side, and just talk about, these are people who are out there in the culture spreading Rand's ideas. And then you could focus on them and talk about their influence and, how many people, how many students they have, how many people they've talked to, how many lectures they've given, how many converts they have who
Whoa,
follow
no
them.
one's ready for that level of measurement.
Well, it's not a hard thing to do, right? You just go, hey, Greg, how many people have you under your wing? Who's following your ideas?
No
And get
one
them.
wants to report low numbers. But I think you're right to focus on this who counts, who's a member, and the pettiness. I mean, those are questions that they supposedly swore off answering in their essay of schisms last year, where they said, they're no longer, or they never were gatekeepers of who's part of the movement and who's not. I think that the essay is part of why he now has to go with just this uncertainty of what the movement even is.
But do you actually think he read that essay in the first place or studied it or remembers it or is actually speaking based upon it? I don't know.
I mean, the way they described it was that it went through approval for everyone.
Okay, well, if the board had to look at it and approve it, he probably read it. And you're probably right, is that they've put themselves, in a place where now they're stuck, because they don't want to be the leaders of the movement. And so now they don't want to acknowledge a movement. It's just this spiraling downward now.
It's just undefinable.
Yeah, now it's just a confused mess. Nobody can understand what a movement is. We don't know. How are we ever going to know who these people are who are spreading the ideas, and how are we going to count them and measure them? It's so confusing, statistics, it's just.
Yeah, exactly. I just, he's also talking about the influence of objectivism and how that is up. But I mean, who is it that's appreciating Rand today? A lot of it are, traditional conservatives and libertarians. I mean, this is also the second time he alluded to the criteria being people who subscribe to his show. I mean, if you can't describe what the objectivist movement is, then I don't know how you can speak of what influence or voice it's having.
Yeah, and you can see at the beginning of him trying to answer this question, he seems a little flustered. And maybe that is why he's struggling to, define it and all of that. Maybe he forgot how to define it or what the definition is, or he forgot how he answered it in the past.
Yeah, I think the questioner put him on the defensive by saying his show growth was flat.
Oh, right, yeah. So he got defensive about that, and so now he's mentally jumbled all up, confused, and now he doesn't know where to take his answer or which direction to go. So I think we're going to see that, like, eventually he provides some minimal sort of answer, but he doesn't get into the details of how to measure it.
Yeah, it's just, on one hand, he seems to be implying that he only counts as subscribers, but yet if there are others who have been influenced by Rand and they're successful in having an impact on the culture, he's still willing to count those successes as part of the movement's influence.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of that's the good part of his thinking, is that he does go in that direction. And he's like, yeah, the movement is broader than I'd like it to be, but he'd rather it be narrower, but he does recognize that it is larger, even though he can't define it. He can't give a definition, or he's against definitions. He does utilize a definition. He does have basic concept for the objectivist movement. He just seems unwilling to explain it in the beginning. But it is a good sign that he includes the broader non-ARI objectivists in the objectivist movement.
So, to the extent it can be measured or quantified, and he does seem to want to focus on objectivism's influence in this next clip, though even that doesn't seem to be totally measurable to him.
I think the more important question is the extent to which objectivism has influence in the world out there, to the degree to which objectivism is viewed in the world out there as having something interesting and important to say about the world. And again, that is hard to figure out, but I think that is clearly growing.
Okay, so I don't understand why it's a difficult question to answer, but he does say objectivism is clearly growing, or the movement is clearly growing, and that seems weird, because I don't know how he could know with clarity that it's growing if he can't define the movement. Like, how does he know that it's clearly growing when he doesn't clearly understand the details? He doesn't know enough. He doesn't know enough to be able to define the movement clearly. So how can he know it's clearly growing? It's just,
we can't measure it, but trust us, it's growing.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. I think ARI has been involved in this movement for decades. So that's another reason why I don't understand Yaron's answer. What was he doing all those decades, or all those years he was involved in the movement? He wasn't measuring anything. He wasn't seeing details that he could use, to induce an answer to this question. I've been in the movement less time than he has, and I think I understand, where it's going. So
yeah, I think we've lost cultural influence for the past 10 years, and maybe since 68, you could argue. But next, I think that he broadens the scope of the movement when he wants to demonstrate growth.
To the extent that there are, how many objectivist intellectuals are there? How many people speaking out there who I might not even agree with often on stuff, who claim to be objectivist? How many objectivism, small o, very loosely. How many objectivist intellectuals are there speaking out there to the world right now? Record levels. How many students are exposed to somebody talking about objectivism? More than ever. But what is the objectivist movement? I don't have a good definition of what the objectivist movement is.
He wants to expand the movement into small o objectivism, which includes people who don't even know about Rand. So I don't understand what he means by small o objectivists. That's what
I'm saying. He's willing to glom on to any successes of someone that's not a subscriber of his, or, but that is, that is getting Rand's influence out there, even piecemeal.
Yeah, he's definitely doing that, which I think is right. He wants to include those people, but
you can't have it both ways. You can't also call them heretics and say that they're distorting her views.
Well, I think subconsciously he might be recognizing that people are mixed. Some people take parts of objectivism, take a particular Randian idea and they spread that, but they don't agree with other things. So, but that doesn't make them a pseudo objectivist, like he'll call them, or dishonest. That just makes them, a Randian. They maybe they like the principles, the fundamental principles, and so they take those and they run with them and they spread those, but they don't like her atheism or something like that, so they don't spread atheism, which is not a central tenet of objectivism. It's an application. So I think that he's grasping this fact about the movement, that people who are involved in spreading Rand's ideas aren't always capital O objectivists. Some of them are religious, and he doesn't seem to want to accept that at a fundamental level, probably because he still is holding his animosity towards the sanctioners of the sanctioners of the sanctioners. It's just this whole sanction principle that's holding
It's
him
so
back.
second-handed. They're worried about what the other objectivists are going to think of them.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be mistaken for a religious objectivist.
Right.
That's kind of crazy. Like, if one of the reasons for him not joining forces with religious conservatives is because he doesn't want to be taken as a religious conservative, or he doesn't want Rand's ideas confused with their ideas.
Yeah, and that's the paradox. I mean, all that growth he seems on the one hand to be trying to take credit for, he hardly seems to want it. And that's really the fuller context for the Yaron clip we played at the beginning. We'll play that part of the answer with what he said after as well.
The objectivist movement is probably ultimately much broader than I'd like it to be, and includes a lot of people who I don't like and disagree with, and a lot of people who've unsubscribed to my show because they're upset by something I've said. I mean, is it a Boolean a part of the objectivist movement, or isn't he part of the objectivist movement, right?
Who did he reference there? A Boolean?
A Boolean, I know him. He's in Yaron's chat. He's someone that also disagrees with Yaron, and so he's a third time he's making the point. This guy disagrees with me. Should he be part of the objectivist movement? I mean,
his chat is living rent free in his mind. That's crazy. I don't know. It sounds like he doesn't want a very broad movement, and I disagree. I think so. I had a quote from Rand. Let me read that. So when Rand was talking about like the progress of her philosophy, she wrote this in her article, A Last Survey, Part 2, in the Ayn Rand letter from January and February of 1976. It's quote, once years ago, I said that the progress of my career reminded me of the progress of Howard Rourke in The Fountainhead. Today, the progress of my philosophy is following the same pattern. And this is a quote, I think, from The Fountainhead. It was as if an underground stream flowed through the world and broke out in sudden springs that shot to the surface at random in unpredictable places. And then she remarks, I do not know how many of these springs will remain and eventually grow into rivers, or how many will turn muddy and dry up. But in the case of these last, others will rise to take their place. Such is the history of the progress of innovations, end quote. So I think Rand saw the movement of her philosophy like the movement of water, down a mountain, and where it pops out in springs in random places. And it's not really random, of course, it's within the riverbed, but or the canyon. But she saw it as this sort of branching out of this system, and it just pops up in random places where
you can't try to micromanage the stream's movement.
You can't, but humans do. We build dams and we change the course of rivers and things like that. And so,
right. But philosophically, they seem to want to do it with like every tiny little new, puddle extension.
Yeah, but my point here is that Rand had a very deep understanding of how she thought her philosophy would spread. And
I assume that's pre-68.
Well, it's The Fountainhead, yes.
Okay.
So, actually, she said the remarks about that quote from the Fountainhead in 1976.
76. Okay. All right.
So yeah, so she had this almost like actually a metaphorical idea of how ideas will spread, and I think Yaron should go back and look at this quote and see how Rand thought it would happen, and then use that as a basis for any sort of organized movement he might put forward or plan that he might concoct, because that's what I think other people are doing. Is they're saying we agree with this, we're just going to take the ideas and run with them ourselves. We're going to be a spring, we're going to be a fountainhead of Rand's system. And so there's all these people around the world who are doing this on their own and in groups and organizations.
But in the past, some people were discouraged from doing so. Either you're not doing it perfectly enough, you've got some things wrong, or it's not under the auspices of the Institute.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to want to, well, they seem to be wanting to micromanage it. And that's impossible, unless they form some sort of dictatorship that takes over America, and then they can wield dictatorial power over how people spread Rand's ideas.
They tried to, but it was an untenable philosophical position. So now it's like they've just thrown their arms up and said, what movement? Anything goes.
Yeah, but I think that's all coming from some fundamental mistake they're making, and it might be the sanction argument. So they're using the moral sanction issue as a way to not work with certain people and to say you're unworthy of us. We don't want to work with you because there's going to be a chaos, or that's going to be bad for the movement.
What
But
movement?
but it's not going to be bad for the movement. It's just going to be them engaging in coalitions or allying with people for a certain purpose to spread
We
Rand's
know
ideas.
that's their weak point, is that they've been hesitant to form coalitions with others. That actually comes up in one of Yaron's attacks on me later, but I'll just tease that for now.
Well,
I'd
let
hate
me
to
say
hear.
let me say one more thing about the springs and all that. So the springs do pop up in different places, but they always come together because they flow downhill, down the canyon, and you get a bigger river. You get little tributaries, and then they form a bigger river. Our problem is that a lot of us are unwilling to come together and form that bigger river. We're just a bunch of tributaries that dry out because we're unwilling to flow all the way downhill into the mainstream.
Yeah, I think part of the nature of individualism is it does make it a little tougher for us to form coalitions, even when context calls for it. But just that continuous, hey, is this person, he's not subscribing, is he part of the movement? It just, that whole, I mean, I'd hate to hear how Yaron sounded if he were consciously trying to convey such a message. I just want to go back to one more point that he made from this last clip, because the unsubscribers are not just upset about something. I mean, for many I've talked to, at least, it's him using Rand's name to advise caving to the progressive establishment on a myriad of issues.
Yeah, you should explain that more, because what exactly do you mean by that?
What he just brings up that and people are just unsubscribing from my channel for who knows what reason. It's like, maybe because it's they don't want you speaking for Rand to cave to the establishment on whatever it is that they're demanding you cave on, whether it's COVID or lockdowns or what have you. But we've seen, he leans left. I mean, that's what this is really about. And all other things being equal, he probably wants Biden to be reelected, unless it's Nikki Haley or Tim Scott.
Right. That seems to be the main criticism I've heard from people who don't like Yaron, they say he's a leftist. You know, they have the name calling where they call him the Objectivists, and that's a terrible thing. I mean, he should do a poll of all the people who are unsubscribing and say, hey, why did you unsubscribe to me? Or go talk to these people, and he could learn, you know, like what their actual grievances with him.
He's just going to claim integrity, and he doesn't care how many people don't see what he sees. Or
Well, chalking it up to they're not objectivists, or they're not interested in the movement, or you know,
or they're
that,
unsubscribing for some reason I could never know.
yeah, but he seems to be tying it to them losing interest in Rand's ideas, which is not true.
Right. They're not
So
losing interest in Rand's ideas. They're
yeah,
getting a sense that they're not being promoted properly.
I think he's losing a lot of people who aren't necessarily the ARI type objectivists who believes Rand was, you know, right on everything, or you know, Rand, we shouldn't try to change anything about her philosophy. You know, the purists, they're not in that
Some of
state.
that's
They're not in
going
that.
on, but I mean, it's broader. There are closed purists that don't like his positions on COVID.
Sure. I mean, also another problem is that the ARI ventures into these topical issues that Rand had nothing to say about, and so then they start coming up with um, whole subject matters that they're forming positions on that are, like, sometimes, in my opinion, they're contrary to a reasonable or rational take on things. And so there's an great argument to be made that they're not being objective, and that they're actually forming some sort of dogma here based
Right.
on their current intellectuals and their points of view, and not on anything Rand said.
And there should be open debate about it, and not just saying, people that disagree with us, well, we don't really define the movement, but if we did, you wouldn't be part of it.
Yeah.
So, but in this next clip, Yaron suddenly remembers his role as head cheerleader for the Ayn Rand Institute.
Now, AOI objectives, people affiliated with AOI, is growing dramatically, is growing substantially, both in terms of money, but in terms of people who participate in our events, people engaged with us, the people who receive and engage with us in things like Ayn Rand University and things like that. That is growing dramatically. So that is one measure. God, I'm running out of time.
We are running out of time.
Well, we certainly sat through a lot of his nonsense to finally learn that ARI is growing dramatically. I thought that ARI needed a PPP loan to survive during COVID. So I don't know if they're, like, really surviving. Are they surviving? Are they healthy, or are they sort of like sick and need a lot of extra help from other sources? I don't
Well,
know,
they'll
but
swear they were being principled when they took that money, but I just think he knows ARI is growing dramatically, and so is the influence, but I mean, still, he can't really measure it. I mean, he thinks the movement's growing, but there's just so almost a kind of hedging on the question.
he's riding the fence, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, he also uses ARI as a measurement here. So he says that ARI is growing dramatically. And if you look at their last couple tax forms, their revenue is growing. I mean, I think they doubled their revenue in the last couple of years. But that's ARI's growth. I mean, he's not necessarily talking about the objectivist movement's growth, because a lot of what ARI does fails to promote or apply Rand's philosophy. It promotes and applies the ideas of ARI intellectuals, which, sometimes they're not even talking about a Randian concept. So you'd have to break down all of the things ARI does and see, like, where are they actually talking about Rand, Are they actually applying her ideas, or are they
Right.
just talking about is Ben Bayer talking about some idea he came up with and it has nothing to do with Rand?
Yeah, I just think if he was going to have all of this, if ARI is really growing that gangbusters, I don't know why he didn't lead the answer with that.
Yeah, it seemed like that would be the first measurement, right? How is it? How is ARI doing?
Right. But and at least if that's the part of the movement you can measure. But he then gives an example of a Fox News writer calling him out of the blue to get quotes on some articles they did about Rand.
But I'll give you one other measure just quickly. You might notice last week there was a story in foxnews.com on Ayn Rand. Today, there's another story, foxnews.com on Ayn Rand, lengthy 1,000-word thing about. And next week, there'll be another story about Ayn Rand in foxnews.com. Fox News contacted me out of nowhere because they want to do stuff because they saw a tweet that I did about, and that's how things happen. Who knows what this will lead to?
Yeah, he's very quick to take credit for that. They saw one of his tweets and then wanted to interview him. I wonder if those articles would have been written without him. Like, would they have seen a different tweet? Like some other objectivist intellectual would have tweeted out, like maybe Craig or.
Yeah, it's obvious the guy
Stephen.
wanted to do a series of articles on Rand, and they reached out to Yaron first.
Yeah, they were pretty positive towards Rand, although they said ARI had, or that her ideas had fallen out of favor in academia, which was one of ARI's main missions. At least when I was working there, they wanted to get their intellectuals into universities and had this whole pipeline idea, where they gain influence over academia. That failed spectacularly, I think.
That's one
So,
measurement that can't be omitted.
yeah, and they spent a lot of time trying to do that when they probably should have been working on just regular folk, people who are like people on the right, people at Fox News who are interested in Rand's ideas and working with the mainstream regular people, just parents and young people. I mean, they do have the book program where they send books to teachers and stuff like that. That's great. But they could have expanded that, started, maybe a parent program where they talk to parents or any other smaller influencer. They could have started off in the online world earlier and tried to expand that at
Yeah.
an early stage. But they were stuck pouring millions and millions of dollars into buying positions for intellectuals at University of Pennsylvania or Pittsburgh or wherever they were.
Yeah, I just think, Yaron is repeatedly said that he thinks the left is less of a threat and even could be an avenue for finding new Rand fans. I'm not even sure why he's working with Fox. I mean, would integrity have been to tell him, to put in the article that Yaron thinks the main threat's going to come from the right?
Yeah, that's a good point too. He thinks that the right is the enemy. It's worse than, well, at least Trump is worse than the left or the Democrats. So why is he sanctioning these people at Fox News? Isn't he worried that they're going to twist his words and then people will confuse what Fox says with actual objectivism? Um, you know, it seems like Fox News was very interested in treating Rand as like a traditionalist because they were saying that she thought the founding fathers created a near perfect system or constitution, and she related to these traditional values. So they were already spinning it, but Yaron didn't seem to care about all of that anymore.
Right.
So
But to your point, if he didn't talk to them and have some kind words, they were going to go down the list.
yeah, they were bent on trying to get back those Randian viewers that they lost, probably. So now that they lost Tucker and all sorts of religious conservatives, they might be trying to gain back more of the like libertarian conservatives. So maybe that's why they had these articles on Rand, and they would have gone to anybody who was an expert on Rand.
Yeah, I think that's true. Well, back to this answer, Yaron ends the answer by promising a better future for the movement, but slips back into closed mode by warning us about selling our souls to you know who.
Visibility is massively out there, and how all this comes together. When you have exponential growth, it doesn't look like things are growing until you actually get that big uptick. It will happen. It's just takes slow, steady effort, and selling your soul to the various pseudo objectivists out there is not going to accelerate it.
Yeah, I'd like to know who he's referencing there. Who's selling their soul? I mean, we should have a debate.
Are we selling our souls if we still talk to people who've unsubscribed from his channel?
Yeah, unsubscribers, all of you guys out there, you sold your soul. You got to go. Oh, this is actually, I don't know if I should mention this, but this is one of the things his son uses. One of the tactics his son uses is you got to buy back your soul.
Oh, right.
So maybe he's going to launch a buy back your soul campaign. He's going to say, hey, if you resubscribe to my channel, you can get your soul back.
What? Wasn't he just saying the objectivist movement, the one broader than he'd like it to be, was still having cultural influence, even if he can't define what it is? I mean, aren't they also part of how Rand has influenced things? I just think it's almost a deterministic fear-mongering to warn people they're selling out if they engage with your intellectual competition. I mean, he's selling out, and he's not even saying whether or not they're actually part of the movement. But if it's not them, it's you're selling your soul.
Yeah, well, he also uses the exponential growth
right
term. So, and you can't see exponential growth until there's the big uptick. But I mean, he should just zoom in on the graph chart, and then he could see the exponential growth a little better. I don't know why he's using that. He's got a very
because it's worked for years.
He's got like a bird's eye view of the growth chart, so he can't see details. But I don't know, when I personally don't see a lot of growth. I see a lot of wheels turning and kind of like stagnation. And I think the movement has sort of sputtered because we're trying to skip, or we're not even actually starting the stage 2 or shifting into second gear, and that would be self-criticism, reformulating our ideas, finding what was wrong, with Rand's philosophy, the errors in it, and then fine-tuning the ideas. And ARI certainly is not doing that. I think that's coming from the dissident side of the objectivist movement. That's where the reliance is on reforming the ideas so that they fit reality the way we have come to understand it now. Now, I think Rand had her context and what she understood, and she tried to formulate her philosophy the best way she could with her knowledge. But we've gained a lot more knowledge since then. And I think some of that knowledge affects her philosophy and shows some of the cracks or flaws in it. And we need to fix those. And otherwise we look silly and dogmatic, like we're unwilling to change when our ideas have been proven false.
David Kelly smiles. The deeper issue to me is how I think he just betrayed all the junk he was spouting about how he doesn't know how to define the objectivist movement. he is defining it to the extent he thinks pseudo-objectivist means his original sentiment, anyone who vehemently disagrees with him or unsubscribes. And, he has the gall to assert that no one can do it faster than him, sitting by the phone, waiting for the Washington Post or Fox News to call. And, never letting himself be aware that he's one of those who has made Rand's name less appealing by sometimes his poor example, especially in politics.
Yeah, I mean, he's gone on shows and said false things that, an objectivist should know off the top of their head. Like when he went on the David Pakman show, and David Pakman articulated one of the axioms, and then he said that's not what Rand said, but it was actually what Rand said. So he does things like that, and then just his attitude, I think, in general, his character, like where he's always off the cuff and is spouting things that are contradictory sometimes, and he's very anti-right. Where the people on the right, a lot of conservatives love Ayn Rand, they love her novels, and they are engaging with her ideas, and then he comes along and says, "You're evil, and I'm not even going to vote for your guy because he's so evil." He doesn't know when to step off the "you're evil" gas pedal and put the brakes on and try to make friends and try to start a coalition with people based on other ideas that everybody agrees upon, and just try to work at the fundamental level and get some steam going with the movement so that we can steamroll over the left and get them out of the way, and then we can have the giant debate he wants to have with the right.
I mean, yeah, that's an idealistic way to put it, but I just think that what you're describing, that whole, your evil thing, that was part and parcel of early objectivism, but it kind of, which if they had been applying it consistently, you could at least say that, but when the left kind of took over the culture and it was like, okay, now we have to say, we feel sorry for all these marginalized groups, they kind of wanted to not be hated by the left. And so they kind of, gained a bit of a softer side, but they still keep that same vitriol for those that aren't threatening them with cancel culture.
Yeah, I think they're still in the 60s and 70s. They think the conservatives are, this huge enemy, huge religious enemy, and they're going to ruin everything. And the left is just this, temporary, blight on civilization that, will go away. And then they'll have to deal with the religious element from the right. So they're more concerned about that, but I think they just see the world in a skewed manner. It's not
Peikoff
that
doesn't
way.
even see it that way anymore.
Yeah, it's not that way. It's the left is the one who's becoming more religious and more dogmatic and more dictatorial, and the right is struggling with abortion. I mean, they can barely get most of the country to ban abortion. That's their big fight.
Yeah,
And then
well, that's a whole.
there's not going to be a theocracy. It's going to be some environmental Marxist woke, some blend of that. Whatever comes out of the left, that's where the dictatorship is coming from.
It's still forming, but I suspect the Democrats and the CCP are going to be leading the effort. You wanted to get to this, Yaron, in June 2022, answering a question.
Right. I think that last year he got a similar question to the one he was answering now. So now he was asked to measure the movement, and back then he was asked generally, like, where is the movement at? So it's kind of the same sort of question. And I think his answer is interesting because he just gives a straight answer, and he doesn't have this whole confusion over how to define the movement.
Are we still in stage one of the objectivist movement? What would classify as stage two? So stage one is ignorance of. Stage two would be denial, and stage three is acceptance. So it depends on what you mean by stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. But I think it's still early, put it that way. I think the culture has absorbed a lot of objectivism. The culture has absorbed a lot of Ayn Rand. A lot of good things about objectivism are, well, everything's about objectivism is good, but a lot of fragments of objectivism, if you will, of objectivism as a system, but elements of objectivism have been integrated somewhat into the culture and into thinking. The full system has not been, the full integration has not. There are pieces of it out there, pieces of reason and rationality, where Ayn Rand has really had an impact, but there's still a lot of work to do.
So I think the most remarkable part of that is he's conceding that even without getting the full system out there, that they are growing influence with just pieces of her ideas. I mean, that is basically the argument for open objectivism as well.
Well, he is certainly saying that it's growing. He says the ideas are getting out there. And another interesting part of that clip is that he doesn't begin with some confusion over defining the movement. He just takes the question, understands it, and goes on. And he even has it broken down into 3 stages of the movement. First there's going to be ignorance, nobody knows about the ideas, and then they're going to hear about them and they'll deny the ideas, and then they're going to accept them. So he sees it in terms of influence. Like,
I think those are like the
and
4 stages of anything, like grief or.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where he got those stages. I would classify them differently, but he generally has an idea of how the movement, what the movement is, and how it should progress, and the goals and stuff. So that's interesting, is that he doesn't try to inject some confusion about it. So I think that he does have an idea of the movement. He does think about it, but for some reason now he's trying to muddle the issue, and he's trying to move more towards the side that says there is no objectivist movement. What are you talking about? You get those people every once in a while. They deny that there is an actual movement.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely an issue. I think it is related to that of schisms, that they can't take that position, that they're, and as long as they kind of feel like they're acknowledged unofficially as the leader of the movement, that's good enough for the inner circle. A week after that first question, I followed up with Yaron. I wasn't planning to do this as a show, but I was truly exasperated, and I asked him if defining the movement would be worthwhile.
Scott says, welcome back. You said recently you didn't have a firm definition of objectivist movement. Might it be worth defining our terms at some point? Not really. I don't think it's worth defining it particularly. I don't think having an objectivist movement per se, and having a definition of it is that important. It's going to be pretty amorphous in what that is, what an objectivist movement is. Different people are going to define it differently, and different people are going to relate to it differently, and that's fine. What's much more important is the focus on getting the word about objectivism out.
He's saying that it would be fine for different people to define it differently. He's very dismissive of conceptual clarity.
Is that phrasing that Rand would like?
I doubt it.
Maybe the definition to you isn't the definition to me.
Yeah, are we objectivists or subjectivists? It seems like he didn't learn anything from Rand's epistemology. He just wants to ramble on, and he didn't seem interested in taking your question seriously. He's very dismissive of it. He's resisting defining the movement. So I don't know where he's going with this. It seems like a transition to me. Like a year ago, he wasn't in this frame of mind, apparently, when he answered that previous question. But now he's all confused and is not even interested in defining the movement. Maybe that's because he's taking a step back and he's retiring as well. And he's more interested in defining what the Yaron Brook show revenue stream should be, and not so interested in, like what the objectivist movement is or where it should go.
I guess, did you hear him say, should there even, do we even need a movement? And then he corrected himself to say a definition of the movement. But it seems like he's almost saying that you don't even need a movement. It just, they so don't want to be affiliated with other people that aren't part of ARI that they'll just say, nah, there's no movement. But
But to answer your question, we do need a definition, right? I mean, we need to know what the objectivist movement is. We need to know what we're doing. And we should organize, in my opinion, we should organize more, form a bigger coalition, a bigger river, a bigger stream, come together and flood this world with Rand's ideas if possible. We need to branch out and spread the ideas as broadly as possible, because that's how you're going to win the culture. If the point is of all this is to win the culture and change everything and turn this world into an objectivist heaven, then we need to spread the ideas as broadly as possible, and we need to stop bickering about things that don't matter. And if someone's out there spreading socialism in the name of objectivism, well, that's first absurd, and second, you should combat that. But I don't see objectivist organizations doing that. At minimum, they're spreading the main principles and they're trying to do their best at doing that. So I don't have a problem with most people who are trying to spread Ayn Rand's ideas. I think it's all pretty good. I mean, there aren't very many total fraudsters out there.
well, especially if you're going to take credit for Rand's influence in the culture.
Yeah, yeah. You need to realize how that happens, right? How do you influence a culture?
There
I
are
mean,
people talking to other people, and some of them are doing it in an imperfect way. But
exactly,
he then
exactly.
he then talks about the Fox News articles on Rand again and how they can help a lot.
And, it is a great opportunity for us to get at least Ayn Rand's name out there to people so that they can engage with her ideas. So no, I don't think it's worthwhile to define it. The movement is constantly changing. It is constantly in flux. People are moving in and out of it. There is a core. There are various bands around it in terms of level of interest. That doesn't matter. What matters for cultural change is not that you have an objectivist movement. What matters for cultural change is that the ideas are out there. The ideas are being engaged with. And for that, we need dozens of new intellectuals.
I don't know what he's talking about. He seems to be drawing a line between the objectivist movement and people out there spreading ideas. Like, what does he think the movement is? Like,
Right.
we need to sit him down in a room and grill him about his definition of the objectivist movement, because I don't know what he's doing. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when I think he gives a little bit of a clue when he talks about core. Core means what he considers the real movement, him and his inner circle, and maybe his subscribers.
Is the core now his show or Ayn Rand Institute?
You can't ask him to define it out loud. It's more just something he has as a concept in his mind. But I mean,
Maybe
if Yaron actually believes that it only matters that her ideas get out there, then he should be even more open to working with other groups.
Well, he should. Yeah. I mean, if he recognizes the movement as a sort of solar system where Ayn Rand is the sun, and maybe he's one of the planets, or ARI is one of the planets orbiting that sun, then he needs to realize that those planets have moons and there's debris and everything, comets going through our system. and it's much more complex than just a core with things branching out from it. It's
As long as he's the core, he doesn't care how the rest of it is defined.
Well, the core could be several organizations. There could be a two,
But he's
two or
telling you
three,
how he sees it, his
it's a two,
core.
2 or 3 star system, and there's all these. Maybe it's a galaxy, with many stars, and we need to recognize that. I mean, that's just using his metaphor of a core of something. I don't know exactly what he meant, but I think it's more like what Rand said. It's more like there's these springs popping up, and that's the movement. It's just people who decide to take Rand's ideas and do something with it, and then eventually they'll come together. They'll come downhill. They'll come together in a river, and we'll all join forces in whatever mission we can agree upon. Ideally, that would be spreading Rand's ideas, her ideas, and not somebody else's ideas who was a student of Rand, but her core ideas. And then you're going to have all sorts of things, all sorts of other organizations orbiting that. There's going to be hills around the
Yeah.
stream, and so it's going to be a whole system. And if we don't start thinking of it like that, we're going to have nothing. It's going to be an unorganized movement. There's going to be just these springs popping up here.
Amorphous, undefined,
Yeah, and just nobody's going to be working with each other. There won't be a river.
consciously undefined.
Yeah.
But the deeper truth to me is that he doesn't even like it when I've said that he should work with others. In fact, in this next clip, he thinks that these Fox News articles on Rand are the best way to counter me.
I think the Ayn Rand Institute is working to do that, and we need exposure. And I think these 3 articles in Fox should generate a lot of exposure, and maybe they would quieten down people like Scott, who keep complaining about, oh, you don't work with anybody, you won't publish anyway, you won't do this, you won't do that. Well, without me on Twitter and without me here, we wouldn't have those 3 articles on Fox, and who knows how many thousands of people will be reading Ayn Rand in the next few months if not for those articles.
So I like to congratulate you on influencing Yaron finally. He seems to want to appease you, and so he's letting the right quote him in some articles, and working with Fox News now, which is a positive in my opinion. Even though it's just the lifestyle section, it's not like he's on the actual TV show or any TV program. But maybe there's a hope for that too. I hope he gets on that Jesse Waters show or whatever they're doing now.
He really must not have cared for my original question. I mean, he's trying to take credit for all this Fox stuff and forgetting that he told us that the guy called him out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it's out of the blue. I guess that means they didn't, call Fox News and try to work with them. They just were waiting for a phone call, I guess.
Right, that exponential growth, you never know how it's going to happen.
Those weird fountainheads, those springs popping up everywhere.
But it's obvious that he's at least heard my message that it is important to work with others. The derisive way he's like, oh, Scott thinks we should work with others.
Yeah, like maybe he's finally accepting that you're right on this point, and that he should work with Fox News and conservatives. I don't even know if Fox News is conservative anymore. Are they?
That may be part of why they reached out to him.
Maybe he likes them now because they're more lefty.
That's right. I just think that, he says that he wants the movement to grow, but why mock someone for saying we should work with other people?
Yeah, that's weird. But he just likes to try to poke at you and call you names and undermine what you're saying. Like, I don't know. You're one of the little flies in his ointment.
I
You
get,
know,
I'm just calling balls and strikes here, so we'll see. But I did want to go back to one other clip of his from February of this year, where he does admit that he thought the movement would be growing faster 10 years ago.
In many ways, I thought the objectivist movement would be further ahead if you would have asked me 10, 12 years.
So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. It's possible to say that the movement is growing and that it's not growing as fast as he wanted. But when he was in the kind of cheerleading mode, it seemed like it was growing. He didn't offer that kind of disclaimer that it still isn't growing as fast as he wanted.
this is why he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. I thought we had record growth at ARI. So you'd assume that if the core of the movement was growing at record levels, you'd see some tangential record level growth as well from the people who orbit ARI. So yeah, it's not clear like what his answer is. He's wishy-washy, and from that
Right.
clip, that
I mean,
clip
if both
sounds
the
like
core movement of people, and the movement of people he doesn't want to include in the movement, plus Rand's influence on the culture has grown, and he also claimed that ARI has grown so much, but does he really believe that if he also believes that it would be much further along by now?
yeah, I don't know, but this clip sounds like a recognition that his little pipeline fantasy didn't work. I guess he might be referring to how he thought they would have all these academics in universities, spreading Rand's ideas through the universities, and they would like have a big influence there. But that doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, of course, there's professors who are objectivists at various universities, but not all of them are affiliated with ARI. So I would like to see some measurements, like how many ARI related intellectuals are there at the universities? How many just Rand inspired or non-ARI objectivists are there? Um, that's something that seems like it could be done fairly easily. They must have contact lists for all these people. So what's the trend? Are we getting more intellectuals into universities or less? What's happening there? Are there more classes or courses on where Rand is included? Um, are there more of those now than 10 years ago? Like, what's going on?
We
I'd
know
like,
there are many less campus clubs than there were 10, 15 years ago.
yeah, no, I haven't seen much talk about campus clubs. I assume there's a few left, or maybe even a dozen or more, but I don't know. I haven't heard much about them. It doesn't seem like you're on speaking at campuses much. I mean, I don't know what the last talk he did at some university. I don't know when that happened. It seems like the left has, I remember the last one where he talked in London and Antifa stormed the speech he was doing
That was
with,
like 4 years ago now.
yeah, with Sargon of Akkad. I mean, was that one of the last times he was at a university? I don't know.
I mean, I think he's spoken at universities. I think, he still travels, and I think a lot of them tend to be European or something, but it's,
Where is he speaking? Like, what can you name a major university where he was talking?
I think these are just arranged by small groups of people. I mean, you can have 10 people at a speech, but he'll go and speak at Exeter there.
Oh, maybe it's more like a salon experience, or maybe he's doing the corporate gigs.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I mean, ultimately, how interested in the movement are you if you're not even willing to define it?
Well, it doesn't seem like he's very interested in it. He just wants to travel the world and talk about his books, I guess, or talk about Alex Epstein.
So for me, the lesson is if you're going to be serious about growing a movement, you first have to be willing to define it. Be that as it may, I think we talked a lot about a lot of good issues today. William, any final thoughts?
Sure. I think that it is important to define the objectivist movement. And maybe in a future episode, we could go into more details and measurements. But I guess we're going to have to do the measurements ourselves. We can't rely on Yaron or the Ayn Rand Institute to do any. And I think it's important for people to step up and take leadership roles in the movement, because our de facto leaders here seem to be abdicating their positions, and they're not willing to even offer a definition of the movement. Or
what does that even mean? It's a club. I mean, you have to spend years befriending Yaron and Harry and Onkar to become a leader for them.
no, well, we wouldn't be leaders for them. We'd be leaders for everybody. It's a leadership for all, and anyone can be a leader. Just step up, be a leader in your be a leader in your own circle, and then try to find friends and other groups that you can work with, and create that river. Don't just be a spring in the mountains, in some isolated part of the mountains where very few people visit and will understand you. Like, we need to come together and join forces, become a larger group with a solid goals and a solid foundation. And there's room to have a lot of leaders in this movement. I don't think we need just one or two or three.
Right, absolutely. In that definition of leadership, I agree with you. I think in that sense, Rand would see almost any individual taking action as a leader.
Yeah, what's that movie? I Am Spartacus. And then everyone chimes in, I am Spartacus, I am Spartacus. We should all say, we are the leaders. I am the leader, you're the leader. Let's all be leaders. And, then we can gain more followers, because not everyone's going to be a leader, but, those who speak up, those who want to take on some role, you'll be a leader, and you'll have your own thing to say and your own ideas. Take some ideas you like from Rand and run with it and be a leader in that category and spread those ideas. And I also want to stress the importance of people the dissidents who may have some disagreements with Rand. That's important too, because I think that's the second gear we need to shift into, or the second level. Or maybe that's like the lake flowing into or the river flowing into a lake, and then the lake has to form, and we need to sit down for a while at the lakeside and decide, what do we agree with Rand on and what do we disagree with, and then we'll have an outlet from that lake and we'll continue on down the mountain. So we just need to focus on ideas and what objective reality tells us is true, and work on refining our ideas and our philosophy. Take what Rand said that was correct and run with it, and reject the things that you disagree with.
Well, yeah, we'll probably have to flesh that out in another episode, but I generally like the spirit of that, and that's a good note to end on. Again, this is the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff, along with William Swig, and we will see you next time.